Hello and good evening, and welcome to the premiere episode of The U.S. Report. I'm James Morrow, and I'll be your host every Friday night now right through the election to give you a front row seat for what promises to be the wildest midterm election season in decades. We've got a jam-packed show coming up, but first, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why we're here. Now, you may have guessed from my accent that I'm a bit of a stranger here myself. Well, I grew up in the United States and have been following American elections for as long as I can remember. Once upon a time, I covered the Clinton White House for U.S. News and World Report, and more recently have covered the 2020 presidential election for this very network. So, why this show and why now? Well, we know that the news out of America just does not stop. And what's more, what happens in Washington and beyond has a huge impact on Australia too, whether it's the economy, the financial markets, or national security, or even just popular culture. But let's also be real. America right now is at a serious crossroads, and frankly, sometimes it feels like it is just pulling apart at the seams. Just this week, we had two major events, which we'll be talking about later in the show: the reaction to the Roe versus Wade reversal and the congressional hearings into Donald Trump and the January 6 events at the Capitol. Both of these hugely fraught, hugely divisive issues, and both being fought over so fiercely because what is at stake is a lot more than just whether or not Donald Trump encouraged an uprising on Capitol Hill or whether judges or legislatures get to regulate abortion. Really, at the heart of all of this is who gets to run the country. Now, in a little while, we're going to talk to Mick Mulvaney. He used to be chief of staff for the Donald Trump White House, but he has some pretty strong and perhaps surprising opinions about how Donald Trump behaved on January 6th. But let's also remember, Donald Trump only became president because so many ordinary Americans felt like they had been disenfranchised by a so-called elite that, well, let's just say doesn't always live up to its name. If January 6th was an outpouring of rage that the 2020 election didn't go the way some Trump supporters wanted it to, well, in the last week, we've seen the rage of those on the left over Roe v. Wade. Not only have there been feral protests in downtowns across the U.S. and Christian pregnancy centers torched and vandalized, but the front pages of elite news outlets like the New York Times and Washington Post have acted like the end of the world was at hand. And before the decision was even handed down, some even allegedly tried to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Now, in November, Republicans will go to the polls trying to gain decisive control of the House and the Senate, and on current odds, they have a very good chance. But 4.5 months is a long time in politics, and I can tell you that a lot can happen to change the outlook, usually something that no one saw coming.